Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty exciting. We are going to visualize the massive environmental footprint of the food retail industry by spinning up a real-time tracking dashboard. You know, when we walk into a brightly lit supermarket, the aisles are perfectly chilled, the produce is fresh from all over the world. It is so easy to forget the literal mountains of energy required to make that whole operation happen. So today, we're going to lift the hood and look right at the engine of those operations.
I want you to imagine a giant digital dashboard powering up right in front of you. Picture these real-time counters just frantically ticking upward, tracking millions of gigajoules of energy and metric tons of CO2 equivalents. Because every single delivery truck out on the highway, every open-air freezer aisle, every massive distribution center, they are all constantly consuming energy and releasing emissions. If you're going to manage a modern food retail operation, you have got to be able to tame those numbers.
But how do we actually capture those numbers? Well, let's dive into that question, because as the old saying goes, you simply cannot manage what you don't measure. In food retail and distribution, throwing around vague claims about being green or eco-friendly, that doesn't cut it anymore. Investors, regulators, and everyday consumers are demanding rigorous, standardized data. And that is exactly where the SASB standards come into play.
All right, here's our agenda. We're going to build our dashboard widget by widget, hitting three main areas. First, tracking fleet fuel management. Second, refrigeration and air emissions. And third, facility energy management. Let's jump in.
Starting right off with Widget 1, Fleet Fuel Management. So, food retailers rely on these massive fleets of vehicles just to move perishable goods around. That makes fuel consumption a huge operational expense and obviously a primary source of greenhouse gas emissions. To figure out our total fuel consumed, measured in gigajoules, it's essentially like balancing a checkbook. We take our beginning fuel inventory, add any purchases made during that reporting period, and then subtract the ending inventory. The SASB standards are super strict about this. You can't just guess based on what a truck should get for gas mileage. You have to use actual physical fuel consumed. Precision is absolutely key here. Now, check out this boundary, because drawing the line in the sand is everything in sustainability accounting. We are only tracking fuel for vehicles owned or directly operated by the entity. Third-party transport is completely out of scope, so if you hire an outside logistics company to haul your avocados across the country, their fuel does not go on this specific widget of your dashboard. We're strictly looking at what is under your direct operational control. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. How do we actually define renewable fuel to ensure it's actually helping the planet? Well, you can't just slap a biofuel label on something and call it a day. The standard says it has to be produced from renewable biomass, it physically has to replace fossil fuels, and, this is the real kicker, it absolutely must achieve a net greenhouse gas reduction across its entire life cycle. So, to build the dial on our dashboard for the percentage of renewable fuel, we use a really straightforward fraction. The numerator is the renewable fuel consumed, and the denominator is the total fuel consumed. This gives us a crystal clear percentage, showing exactly how well a retailer is pivoting their transport fleet away from traditional fossil fuels. All right, moving those tomatoes from the truck to the cooler, let's look at Widget 2, Refrigeration and Air Emissions. We're tackling a massive, often totally invisible issue in food retail here. We are focusing strictly on the incredibly potent greenhouse gases that leak directly out of heat pumps and cooling cycles. And to be clear, this is entirely separate from burning fossil fuels. These are your Scope 1 emissions from refrigerants. Chemicals like HFCs can literally be thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to trapping heat in the atmosphere. We measure all of this in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. So we've actually got to track the chemicals themselves, splitting up the older refrigerants, the ones containing ozone-destroying CFCs, from the modern zero ODP alternatives. Ozone-depleting potential, or ODP, has been a huge regulatory target for years. Thanks to international treaties like the Montreal Protocol, industries have been pushed hard to phase out the bad stuff. A zero ODP refrigerant, it has absolutely zero impact on the stratospheric ozone layer. For the next tile on our dashboard, we calculate the percentage by weight of refrigerants consumed that have zero ozone-depleting potential, divided by the total weight of all refrigerants consumed. At a glance, this metric tells us exactly how much of a company's cooling infrastructure has been modernized to get rid of those ozone-destroying chemicals. And this right here, This is our leak rate. It brilliantly illustrates exactly what percentage of our cooling chemicals are just escaping right into the atmosphere. The formula is super simple: pounds of refrigerant emitted divided by the pounds charged into the equipment. And look, a high emissions rate doesn't just mean you're hurting the environment. You are literally leaking cash out of your cooling systems because you constantly have to buy more chemicals to replace what escaped. Finally, let's zoom out to the whole building with Widget 3, Facility Energy Management. This metric is all about the energy, keeping the lights on, the ovens baking, the massive HVAC systems running. It captures the total operational energy consumed across all retail locations and distribution centers. But notice the last bullet. We are carefully excluding the fleet vehicle fuel since we already tracked that in Widget 1. Measured in gigajoules, this aggregate number includes the power you buy from the grid, plus any power you generate yourself. It is the true energy footprint of the brick-and-mortar operations.
Now, to really understand that footprint, we have to split our operational consumption right down the middle. What are we pulling from the standard utility grid versus what is coming from renewable sources like solar or wind? It's a vital distinction because it exposes a company's reliance on traditional fossil fuel-heavy power grids compared to clean alternatives. Our final set of dashboard dials visualizes these percentages. We just divide our grid electricity and then our renewable electricity by our total energy consumption. These dials give anyone looking, investors, stakeholders, a really clear, instant snapshot of how sustainable the day-to-day facility operations actually are. But claiming that renewable slice isn't quite as easy as just paying a utility bill to a company that happens to own a few wind turbines.
Here is the crucial catch. You can't just claim renewable energy by default. You have to explicitly own and retire the associated certificates to prove your green footprint. Under SASB standards, you need renewable energy certificates, or RECs, or guarantees of origin, and retiring them means you cannot sell that green credential to someone else while still claiming it for yourself. Also, if your local grid just happens to be, say, 10% wind power by default, you don't get to claim that 10% because it's totally out of your control. You have to take deliberate, measurable action.
All right, let's bring it all together for the completed dashboard and look at the bottom line. With our dashboard fully running, it becomes incredibly clear that sustainability and financial performance are deeply, permanently linked. Upgrading to zero ODP refrigerants or investing in solar isn't just about ticking a compliance box. It's a roadmap to massive operational savings. The food retail industry is famous for its razor-thin profit margins. Finding efficiencies in fuel use, fixing those incredibly expensive refrigerant leaks, and locking in renewable energy to shield yourself from volatile fossil fuel prices, that is how you protect your overall profitability while dodging huge regulatory risks. Frameworks like the SASB standards are amazing because they literally take the guesswork out of sustainability. They provide these rigorous, standardized formulas that operators and investors can actually trust. Without these strict boundaries, like knowing exactly what counts as a REC or how to isolate Scope 1 refrigerant emissions, trying to compare one supermarket chain's green claims to another's would be like comparing apples to oranges. It would be impossible. So as the food industry faces mounting, complex climate challenges, the ultimate question is this: are you measuring the right things today to ensure your survival tomorrow? Because as we've just seen, tracking our dashboard, every single gigajoule and every leaky freezer truly matters. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. And remember to always keep looking for the real data behind the claims.